I remember calling one of the investors from my first company, and we know each other well. And he's like, "All right, let me get this straight. You've got a kid who's under 2. You've got a kid on the way. You're currently building a house, and your wife doesn't work, and you want to quit your job to go start a company doing cybersecurity for medical devices. This sounds like a terrible idea."
Hey everyone, today I had a chance to chat with Mike Kijewski. He's the founder and CEO of MedCrypt. MedCrypt provides cybersecurity solutions for medical device manufacturers. Mike has a super interesting story. He started off his career as a physics instructor in high school, eventually took a job in the quote unquote business world, and went on to start and found 2 different companies, both highly technical. He shares his story about becoming a technical founder and how he learned to develop some of the leadership skills that have been able to make him successful with 2 different companies. Mike, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
So take me back. You've got a fascinating story in terms of being a multi-timed entrepreneur and CEO. And I saw just on your backstory that you were actually a physics instructor, I think at the high school level. Tell me, what was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a really inspirational chemistry teacher in high school who changed my life. I wasn't a very attentive student, let's say. I didn't spend a lot of time doing homework, but I just became fascinated by chemistry and science in this guy's class. Mr. James Ferris at St. Pius X High School in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Rest in peace, Mr. Ferris. But he introduced me to science. I found physics, really loved physics, and just thought it'd be a great way to give back to the community by sharing my love of physics with students, and ended up teaching high school physics for 3 years in a high school in suburban Philadelphia called Downingtown East High School. I really loved the experience, loved being in the classroom with the students. But after doing it for a couple of years, thought that I had a wife. We wanted to have kids, and as you know, teachers aren't really paid. Man, it's a good thing to dig into here. I was paid I think my first year teaching, I made like $36,000 a year or something. And going from being a broke college student, $36,000 sounds like a lot. And then I was in my 3rd year, and I'm like, I love my job, but I want to start a family. I want to own a house. I want my wife to be able to stay home for a little bit if we have kids, and you couldn't do that on 36 grand. So I ended up leaving teaching to go work for a company that built radiation oncology facilities in hospitals. And I got a huge pay raise to like $52,000 a year or something. And in retrospect, had I made, $55,000 as a teacher, I'd still be teaching. And I'd be, I'd be happy and healthy, and hopefully I would have influenced the lives of many children. But just that little difference between, 36 and 52 made it a tough call.
Yeah, there's of course the idealist part of ourselves, and there's also the reality of paying bills and so forth. But what a fascinating jump! What was that like, just to go? I know I can relate because I've known a lot of people who've gone from, like my sister is a physician and she's gone and worked in the business world. Now she's practicing medicine again. But what was that like for you in terms of jumping from something that was really purpose driven? You're helping students. Now you're jumping and working for a commercial enterprise.
Yeah. So when I concluded that I wanted to leave teaching and do something in the commercial for a commercial enterprise, I thought about all the different areas where somebody with a math background or a physics background would be useful. And there are people who work in finance, and I'm going to work every day just to make somebody's retirement account go up by 0.1%. It didn't feel like I was changing the world or making the world a better place. And no disrespect to those industries, but for me, I wanted to do something that's a little closer to patients, closer to people. So I thought about being a doctor. My mom coincidentally went to medical school late in life. So around this time, she was finishing up her residency, and I went and shadowed one of the physicians that she worked with. And I said to this guy, "Hey, if you were to do it all over again, would you go to med school?" And he's like, "Heck no. I'm 33 years old and I'm still making 40 grand a year, and I drive a broken down minivan. Go do something else." And I think about that interaction a lot, because had he said, "Yeah, this is great," maybe I'd be a doctor now. I don't know. But I ended up settling on working in the healthcare technology field that I thought was a good balance between having the possibility of making a couple bucks, but also ultimately impacting people's lives in a positive way going forward. After I'm 15 years into this, feel like the market is largely that, right? It's a market where ultimately we're trying to make patients' lives better. But it's also, can be lucrative if you do it correctly. Interestingly, I found that my 3 years as a high school physics teacher was a really good preparation for certain aspects of my job currently. So first, I ended up going to grad school, got a master's in medical physics and then an MBA. Standing in front of a group of 30 students all day doing algebra turns out to make your standardized test scores go up a little bit. So standardized testing was a little bit easier after doing, multiplying fractions all day, every day for 3 years. That was great. And also the public speaking aspects of teaching, right? You're standing in front of 30 students who really don't want to be in physics class, and you got to make it a little bit entertaining for them. I have found that, to whatever degree I have been successful, it has largely been tied to my ability to tell a story and get people engaged. I think a lot of that came from my time teaching. So lots of similarities, lots of differences. But overall, I think it was a really good preparation. And if anybody listening to this is a college student or recent college grad and is thinking about what they want to do career wise, I think programs like Teach for America, where you go spend 2 years teaching somewhere, can be a really great preparation for whatever career you think will come afterward.
Absolutely. I mean, just distilling what can be complex concepts down into something that really resonates with someone, but also putting yourselves in their shoes. I can't even imagine my son's about to be a high school freshman next year, and making it interesting, making it compelling. Like, what's in it for me, right? It's like, how does algebra or calculus or chemistry or physics apply to my real world, right? Beyond that, beyond just like trying to get a grade that gets me into college.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, on each of the whatever 30 topics that you cover over the course of a year of high school physics, what are the interesting things that will bring something close to home for people? And some obvious stuff like landing on the moon. Like, hey, the math that they use to land on the moon isn't all that different than the math we're doing right now, calculating the trajectory of a tennis ball or something. But there's other weird stuff like, students would ask me, when am I ever going to need to use trigonometry? Like, when am I ever going to need to use a cosine function or whatever? Like, well, you're probably not going to have a job where you need to be calculating tangents and cosines all day. But did you know that, your eyes and your brain are actually doing a version of trigonometry when you're using depth perception, right? You're trying to figure out how far away is something. One of the ways that your brain has figured out to do that is the angle between your eyes as you focus on something changes, and the angle gets, closer to zero as the thing is farther away. And if you're looking at the end of your nose, it gets really, really close. It's basically your brain doing some version of trigonometry. So try to come up with, lots of things that made physics more, tactile and close to home for students.
Yeah, so important, and actually just near and dear to my heart from this morning. I took a year of high school physics. I took a year of college physics, actually tutored college level physics. Yet I had an electrician today, and can I remember all the physics of what was going on there? Probably not. If I'd had someone who said, hey, forget about like calculating all these complex things I would never use in my life, but actually real practical application is just so important to get people to actually absorb and to want to learn it.
Yeah. That was one of the best parts of my education in especially undergrad physics is you do a little bit of everything. Like, as a physics student, you're doing math, but you're not really a mathematician, right? You're talking about subatomic particles, but you don't really talk about molecules, which is where chemistry comes into place, right? And we did a lot of electronics, so I understand the basics of how a computer works, but I'm not a computer engineer or electrical engineer. So really, it can be a very good subject for a generalist to study, which maybe as a good segue, made it somewhat challenging to get a job right out of college. I remember having a physics degree and thinking like, oh, I'm smart. People are going to know I'm smart. They'd love to work with a physicist. I remember sending my resume to at least a dozen different medical device companies and just never hearing anything back from any of them, because with a physics degree, you're not really explicitly qualified for anything other than being a high school physics teacher. So I chuckled a little bit during the intro where you said that I have a fascinating background. I've started multiple companies. I'm only partially joking when I say I think I started each of these companies out of a fear of just being unemployable, right? That experience of being 22 years old, looking for some job in an industry, sending my resume to Siemens and Philips and all these companies that make imaging equipment, never hearing anything back. I think I internalized the narrative like, oh, that means I'm not employable. I guess I got to start my own company if I want a job. And somewhat ironically, here I am, 16 years after starting my first business, still paying the bills with it, which is a great feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to ask you, because given your comment about taking a job in the quote unquote business world because you want to have that higher compensation, interesting that most people who start companies, you have to have some level of being okay with risk, right? So not being totally risk averse. I was curious, like, how do you get to that point where it's like there's some level of fear of not making enough money as a teacher, but now it's like you're going to the brave world of being an entrepreneur where nothing is guaranteed.
Oh, I'm super risk averse. So I think this is I see this as a common, I don't know if fallacy is the right word about entrepreneurs, that they're, they have a higher risk tolerance. In my case, I stopped teaching in 2007 and I entered graduate school to study medical physics in 2008. And I remember when I was applying to business school it would have been like the fall of 2009, we were in the aftermath of the Great Recession or whatever we called it, where people were losing their jobs left and right. And I think I also internalized this narrative that getting a job at GE is not secure, right? GE does layoffs all the time. They're downsizing and really your fate at a giant company, not to pick on GE specifically, but if you work for a 100,000 person company, your ability to influence your longevity at that company is somewhat limited. You come into work on a Friday and you find out like, hey, the company's not interested in working on that particular problem anymore. So I think I actually saw starting a business as increasing job security a little bit, because at least if things aren't going right, you kind of know about it. You have a couple of levers that you can pull. So I think my entry into entrepreneurship was actually more of a risk like mitigation strategy than it was having some high tolerance for risk.
Yeah, I think anyone who's been around long enough in the work world knows that you're at the whims of the board and the markets and so forth, that where they can just literally draw a line, everyone below it is toast.
But at the same time, I do have maybe a higher risk tolerance in certain areas of life than other people do, and I really try to focus on the idea that we're here on this planet for a relatively short period of time, right? And someday I'm not going to be here anymore, and I want to make some positive impact on the world while I'm here. And if that requires taking some greater risk and doing something that might fail, in hopes of leaving a bigger mark on the world than you would have, if I was working, some, middle management desk job somewhere, then I think that plays into the decision a lot as well. But it's it definitely, I definitely think the notion that starting a business is super risky and working for a big company is free of risk is not necessarily not the way that I view it.
Yeah, and the way you frame that, there's a huge risk in doing nothing, of taking a job that has no soul, that has no purpose, that doesn't allow you to leave a meaningful mark on the planet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So take me forward. So I'm curious, you go from a physics teacher to now you're a medical physicist, which not even sure what that is. And then how do you go from that to actually starting a company?
Yeah, so somewhat funny story. I was at still a teacher looking for a job, wasn't having success finding a job at a medical device manufacturer, and went to a barbecue at like a friend from high school's house and ran into a classmate of mine who I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. And we're talking about what we do. And she goes, oh, actually my dad owns this company building radiation shielding for radiation oncology facilities. And I'm like, oh, that's like, related in some way to the field of, healthcare technology, a field I want to work in. I'd love to talk to the guy. Ended up taking a job working for her family's company, calculating how thick the radiation shielding needed to be for a given medical device that was going into a hospital, something that uses radiation to treat cancer. And I remember starting the first day of work and saying, okay, I got to do this complicated set of calculations to analyze the hospital and radiation safety. What software do you use to do this? And they said, we use Microsoft Word. Like, what do you mean Word? And it turns out that like they had written out the equation in a Microsoft Word document, and then they'd write it again, but fill in the numbers and then use a calculator and come up with 3.2 feet of concrete. Like, that's seriously the way that we're doing this? So I worked at that company for a year while I applied to graduate school. I remember I'd been accepted to graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania. I knew I was going to start in the fall. I remember calling my dad, who had previously worked for Siemens, on the way home from work one day, and saying, hey, I think I have an idea to write some software to automate this process that I was doing manually for a year. This is a crazy idea to start a company around it. And he's not I don't think my dad is being particularly entrepreneurial, but he was surprisingly supportive of it. He's like, no, it's not crazy at all. Stuff like that works all the time. Remember, he set up a meeting for me with somebody he worked with at Siemens to see if this is a viable business. I ended up posting an ad on Craigslist looking for co-founders, people who knew how to write software, and against all odds, found a great set of co-founders that I started the business with that I still work with to this day, 15 years later. So the short version of that story is we ended up building two pieces of software that were useful for physicists working in medicine, primarily in radiation oncology, to do radiation safety analysis. And just about 5 years after starting that business, we were acquired by the largest manufacturer of radiation oncology equipment, Varian Medical Systems. It was a really great outcome for everybody. It wasn't a $1 billion exit per se, but for a former high school physics teacher, it was a life-changing outcome. It was really great experience for me to go from seeing a problem, ideating a solution to the problem, starting a business, generating revenue, raising a little bit of money from investors, and then exiting was really a really great professional experience.
I think it's fascinating from that, right? Like building just the cement structures, the insulation, et cetera, to starting a company. Now it's like you're in a completely different realm. Tell me about what you're doing now and like around medical device security.
I remember when I was starting the first company around radiation shielding analysis, feeling like, am I really qualified to do this? And it turned out that there were, I think, literally 5 people in the world who were really considered experts in assessing radiation shielding for radiation oncology, right? Not a huge market, it's unsurprising, but like there's 5 people, I know 3 of them, and they're smart people, but I'm smart too. And I feel like I can do something here. And we built a product and it worked. And I believe it's still in use today by Varian. So fast forward, 10 years, I'm working at Varian as a product manager on some healthcare software. And I hear this story that I have to anonymize a little bit, but I hear this story secondhand that there is a hospital going around to medical device manufacturers saying, we're treating a very high profile patient for a specific cancer. And we're concerned that a specific nation state is going to attempt to assassinate them using cybersecurity vulnerabilities in the products we're using to treat them. And the hospital had said that they tested a bunch of these different systems and they went to the manufacturers of these systems and said, hey, please go fix these security vulnerabilities. And this was like mid 2014. And at the time, if you Googled like healthcare cybersecurity, the vast majority of people were only thinking about patient data privacy. So somebody stealing your social security number. Very few people were thinking about, pacemakers are little computers in your chest that control your heart. Like somebody could hack a pacemaker and kill a patient. Why would they want to do that? I don't know, but it's, technically possible. So I started looking into the field and found that, similarly, there was a very small number of experts about the intersection of cybersecurity and medical devices. And really, nights and weekends started researching whether or not I thought there was a viable business here. And it came to the conclusion that there doesn't appear to be anybody who's obviously qualified to solve this problem. I've got a little bit of experience with software. I've got some experience with medical devices, and I have at least, an interest in cybersecurity. Maybe we can do something here. That was 2014 through 2016, and we ended up raising about $750,000 from angel investors to start the business in mid 2016. And I left my job at Varian full time in mid 2016. Started working on this new company, MedCrypt, building tools to help medical device manufacturers build products that are secure by design. And we're still a venture-backed business. We're still growing the business. So lots of challenges to overcome here in the future. But it appears as though the problem we're solving is a real problem. FDA has passed rules around it. Right now, as we speak, there's a major oversimplification, but an insurance company that's unable to pay doctors because of a cyber attack in the healthcare space. So it's a real problem, and it's gotten real attention in a way that it wasn't getting 8 years ago.
It sounds so easy the way you say it, right? You started a company, you exited, started another company, you've grown it. Like, what were some of the early challenges, like in terms of just starting and founding MedCrypt, and maybe even some of the real inflection points that enabled you to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I remember, I guess back to the risk profile thing. I remember calling one of the investors from my first company, who was coincidentally a college professor of mine and is now on the board of MedCrypt and is one of my most trusted advisors. I remember calling him and saying, hey, Gary, I think I'm going to start a company around medical device cybersecurity. And, we know each other well. And he's like, all right, let me get this straight. You've got a kid who's under 2. You've got a kid on the way. You're currently building a house and your wife doesn't work and you want to quit your job to go start a company doing cybersecurity for medical devices. This sounds like a terrible idea. That was his advice in mid 2015. And, slowly he came around, and there were a series of inflection points or events that happened in the market to prove that, wait, this really is a problem. Like, let's see if there's a business here. But it became very obvious through the course of 2016 that this was a problem. Most notably, we started talking to investors in November of 2015, and most of them said, who would ever want to hack a medical device? But then two things happened in 2016 that changed that conversation. The first was in, I believe, January of 16, there was the first recorded ransomware attack on a hospital. It was a LA Presbyterian Hospital or something in Los Angeles that interrupted the hospital's ability to deliver care for a while. And that was, I believe, the first like widely reported, attack on a healthcare system. And that caused a lot of the investors that we were talking to say, oh, like maybe there is something here. And then in the fall of 2016, a pacemaker manufacturer called St. Jude, who was about to be acquired by Abbott, had a situation where a security researcher accused them of having a security vulnerability in a pacemaker that could lead to patient harm. It led to lawsuits and protracted back and forths, but it became a real topic of discussion in the healthcare space in late 2016. And then about a year later, the FDA ended up recalling 500,000 implanted pacemakers for a firmware update because of the security vulnerability that had been found. So, the timing was fortuitous or lucky or whatever, in that we started to look at this problem and talk to investors concurrently with certain things happening in the market to substantiate that this was a real problem.
Yeah, I'd love to switch gears a little bit. And I think you have an interesting story as well, is being a super technical guy with a science background and having to learn the people side of the business. Like, what was that journey like for you in terms of developing some of those softer skills so that you could actually become a CEO, a multi-time CEO?
TBD, right? It's an ever evolving journey here. When we first started MedCrypt, and it was three of us, and then very quickly there was three founders and two early employees. 3 months after we started the business, it was really a huge benefit to be a technical co-founder, right? Like I'm not writing code that you want deployed into a pacemaker. My co-founder Eric is the one who you want doing that. But I'm technical enough to prototype some stuff and understand some problems and be involved in an in-depth technical discussion. And that was really, if I had to choose between the skills, right, soft skills or technical skills, the first year of the business, technical skills are really, really important. If you think about a business that's very successful over the course of many decades, well, in your 20th year, if you're a technical CEO, you have to have developed a bunch of soft skills as well. And that's, that for me, I definitely consider myself to be technical first. And the soft skills part of it is something that I actively work on. Maybe a funny story about this. I ended up, I did a master's in medical physics. There were 11 students in the program. I was without a doubt the dumbest of the 11 students in the class. I'm not saying I was the dumbest person in a room of very smart people, and I'm okay with that, right? But man, there's some very smart people that go into physics, and I had a couple of classes where I'm like, man, I've reached my brain's ability, maximum ability to do math here. But then I went from the physics program into an MBA program where I was one of the more quantitative people, at least in the MBA program. In the first semester of the program, you take a course called Managing People at Work. You have to basically write essays about what would you do in a certain scenario. And I'm coming from 2 years of just like doing math nonstop, right? Now I have to write essays about what I do if somebody in your company's sad or something. Like, I don't know. And I write an essay about it. I ended up getting a C+ in that class, which I think was my lowest grade in graduate school. And I remember thinking like, oh man, that's nonsense. Like their grading rubric is off. I'm great at dealing with people. Now after we're in year 7 or 8 of MedCrypt, depending upon how you count. We have 60 employees that we're working with constantly. I definitely find that I'm more of a technical CEO, and the soft skills are something that I definitely need to work on. But that said, I think it's probably easier. Is this true? It's probably easier to develop the soft skills if you're really dedicated to doing so than it would be to develop the technical side if you had to choose one or the other.
How have you gone about learning that? Obviously, I see a wealth of books behind you. I know you talked about on another podcast reading Chris Voss and the likes of that. Like, how have you gone about actually teaching yourself some of those soft skills?
Oh, yeah, these books are on my wife's. The records are mine. The books are my wife's. So I definitely do a fair amount of reading, but the bookshelf behind you may belie how much I actually read. There's definitely a bunch of books I really love. The Chris Voss book, Never Split the Difference, is definitely one of my favorite. But I'm constantly reading. Maybe this sounds silly, but I'm on Twitter a lot. I'm reading people who are business leaders and thought leaders opining about things on Twitter and writing blog posts, and 90% of the stuff that you come across on Twitter and in blog posts is of questionable value. But every once in a while, you come across some real good stuff. In fact, a famous venture capitalist, Fred Wilson, who used to blog every day for 15 years or so. I think he's been a victim of his own success, and that his fund was so successful he no longer blogs all every day. But he has just some really great posts. Like he had a series of posts called MBA Mondays, talking about, for a technical coder, how do you start a business? That sort of stuff is really valuable. But I think if I had to point to one thing that has been most useful in developing soft skills, it's not assuming that I'm the smartest person in the room or that my initial reaction to something is the right reaction. So if I'm in a conversation with one of my coworkers and they have a drastically different opinion about something than I do, I think some, maybe technical founders who were the smartest person in their class in high school and the smartest person in the class in college might snap to the conclusion, well, I'm smarter than this person, I'm the CEO, we're going to do this my way. I've really tried to ask in this hypothetical situation, ask my coworkers, what is it that's led you to this conclusion? Like, here's my conclusion. Tell me what I'm wrong. Here's my logic. Help me explain how you came to a different conclusion, and not doing it in an antagonizing way, but asking those questions, really trying to learn what somebody else's perspective is. And my experience in doing that is twofold. Number one, I frequently learned something I didn't know. Right, I learned some detail about the problem in question that wasn't obvious to me. And once I learn that detail, maybe I come to a different conclusion. But I've also found that I think my coworkers would say that when we are in a situation where we're debating something internally, that they feel heard when we're having the conversation. And I think that makes people feel a little more empowered. And if we end up having to make a decision that isn't what one of my coworkers agrees with, at least they feel like they were able to voice their opinion. At least I hope that's the way that they feel.
Yeah, and what you talk about really underscores the point of humility and curiosity. And how do you actually, what would your advice be to someone who really is technical and maybe actually is this quote unquote smartest person in the room? How do you go about developing that sense of humility and just curiosity of other people's ideas and perspectives?
If I think AI is super hot right now, if you think about somebody who's a great machine learning expert, there's a finite number of machine learning experts. But if you find the person within a 20-mile radius of you who's the smartest machine learning AI person, engineer, and you ask them, "Hey, are you the smartest AI machine learning person in the world?" They'd almost certainly say, "No, not at all." Right? And if they're in the room with one of the founders of OpenAI or something, they'd probably be listening a lot. Like, oh man, I have the opportunity to listen to, Ilya from OpenAI. Tell me, I want to learn here. Trying to embrace that same attitude when it comes to soft skills and dealing with coworkers at work, right? There's some sort of, strategy decision you're making about talking to a customer, and you're a technical CEO and your head of sales is telling you, oh, we should do X, and X doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. What if this, what if this advice or this conclusion was coming to you from Ilya at OpenAI about a technical detail? Would you listen to the person? Yeah, probably. Well, in a sales context, it's quite likely that your head of sales knows more about, sales processes than you do as a technical CEO. So just, maybe switching the frame of the situation. Like, what if I were talking to, John Carmack right now about, writing code? Would I listen and hear what he has to say? Yeah, probably. And, let's do that in this situation.
Yeah, we talked last time about work-life balance, and you're an avid surfer here in San Diego, like myself. And you had a little bit of a funny story that talked about I think it was like an out-of-office message when you were on vacation one time. Do you mind just sharing that story?
Yeah. So when I was working at Varian, I remember the first year that I was there. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do the best job possible. I'm going to be star employee, and I'm going to wear a tie or whatever. And then I'm there for 3 years, and I know that I'm going to leave to start a business. And maybe the last 6 months I was there, I was a little looser with things than I would have been initially. And I found that I sort of let my personality come out maybe a little more in the last 6 months that I was there than I was initially. I remember going on a family trip to Disney World and sending an out-of-office message. And normally my out-of-office message would say something like, "Hey, I'm at Disney World with the family. It might take me 15 minutes to respond to your email. Please, apologies for the long delay on responses here." And I'd be constantly checking my email. Once that I sent an out-of-office message that said, "Hey, I'm out of office until next Tuesday. I'm probably at Disney World right now riding Space Mountain with my 6-year-old. If this is really urgent, please text me. Otherwise, I'm going to be eating Dole Whip in Epcot or something." And I didn't really think much as I wrote the message. And then when I came back to work and checked on my email, I was really shocked by the number of people who responded to my out-of-office message like, "Oh, it is so great that you're at Disney World with your family. I was there last year, and we also had Dole Whip at Epcot. You should also try the pretzels in Germantown," or whatever. Right? So it started a conversation on a human level with a lot of people, and it helped me see that being a human in business is really an asset. I think when I think about, you watch Mad Men or something, and you look at how people talked about business in prior generations, everything's very formal and everything's very by the book and everybody's pretty buttoned up. I think in 2024, I don't know if it's a generational thing or what, but being a human who has a family and likes and interests outside of work is really an asset when building relationships with people you're doing business with. And ultimately, business is all about relationships, right? Unless you're a solopreneur writing software that you never need to talk to your users and they're just buying it online, which is a real thing. And if that's the case, great. But in the enterprise software world and that I work with, it's really relationship driven, and being able to show a little bit of your humanity seems to pay off.
Yeah, so true. And I think it's interesting that what you started as like whatever, I'm going to leave and start a company, that became almost like a guiding principle of just your life and your leadership style.
Yeah. And it doesn't come without, there's some pros and cons of that approach, right? There are days at work where, I'm not really somebody who comes into work and yells and says like, hey, why is the server down and you're fired, right? That's not me. But interestingly, as part of, I believe this is the exercise that you helped MedCrypt go through, you walked us through a series of questions that placed people on a three-way spectrum where the three sides of the spectrum were different aspects of personality. And one of them, you're going to do a much better job of explaining this than I will. But one of the quadrants was like performance oriented. And our organization observed that the vast majority, first of all, the founders of the company were in the quadrants that were not necessarily performance oriented. We were like, people oriented and more oriented towards soft skills, ironically. And then it seemed like all of the people we hired also gravitated in those quadrants. And our VP of engineering, Clayton, who's a super smart guy and very performance oriented, is like, hey, is it a problem that we don't have more people in the performance quadrant? And it's definitely made me think over the last 6 months since we did that exercise. Are there times where being a super nice person and outgoing and being a human and easily approachable and listening to everybody, is there times where that's valuable? 99% of the times, yes. But also in an early stage startup where the company's demise is constantly around the corner, there are times where like, we got to ship software and the software's got to work and we have to be performance oriented. And that's definitely something that I've been thinking about explicitly since our exercise together.
Yeah, no, that's a tough one, right? I mean, we can lead with different styles, but it's about figuring out sometimes how to triangulate into that in terms of getting that focus around performance. So yeah, definitely part of a bigger conversation for sure. But what's next for MedCrypt? Obviously, you mentioned just your company's demise is right around the corner. I know you guys have done really well to date, but like, what's next for you guys?
Yeah. So first, to be clear, any startup that is not profitable, right? We were fortunate enough to go through Y Combinator, the startup accelerator, and one of the founders of Y Combinator, Paul Graham, wrote a famous essay called "Default Dead, Default Alive," or something to that effect. And basically, his recommendation to early YC companies was get to default alive, which means with the cash that you have in the bank and your current sales and your current burn rate and the trajectory of sales growth, your runway, is infinite. That's really the state that you want to be in. Most tech companies especially in the last 10 years, have not had to do that, right? Investor money has been relatively easy to get and interest rates were low. So there's a balance to be struck between how fast can we grow, what stuff can we build, how quickly can we build it, versus building a long-term sustainable business that maybe can't grow as fast because you're growing with the cash that you're throwing off from the business. So that's the situation that most tech startups are in 2024, is finding the right balance there. For us at MedCrypt, we're at a really interesting time in our market where, how do I tell a story in an anonymized fashion? One of the medical device manufacturers that we presented our platform to very early on in the life of the business, I think it was actually the first presentation we did to a medical device manufacturer. We say, hey, we're focusing on cybersecurity and connected medical devices. Here's what we think the problems are. Here's our solution. And 5 minutes into the meeting, the engineering lead stopped me and said, hey, you seem like a nice guy. You said you just started this business. Nobody cares about medical device cybersecurity. This is not a thing. Nobody thinks about this. You should start a different business. I was like, oh my God, what a terrible way to end my first demo to a big device manufacturer. And suffices to say, 6 years later, we developed a very important relationship with that same medical device manufacturer, which to me was evidence that, this was a thing that people care about. And now this company sees that and they see this as a big problem. So if you talk to any med tech company and say, hey, what are your top 5 concerns or priorities going forward? It's a very high probability that product security is going to be one of their top priorities. The FDA has passed new rules around it. They're enforcing these rules. If your medical device regulatory submission does not satisfy these cybersecurity rules, you're not going to get approval. So that's a really great change in the market. That's really only 6 months old or so. So now we're really starting to see the market materialize, seeing device manufacturers make real changes to their processes. But understandably, and rightfully so, device manufacturers change slowly, right? The whole, like the Facebook idea of move fast and break things doesn't work in a pacemaker. Like you really want to make sure your pacemaker works correctly. So most med tech companies are averse to, fast changes. They want to make sure that if they're changing the way they do things, they're changing it in a safe way, which I applaud. So, right now we're really at the phase of seeing a huge uptick in demand and just seeing how huge is that uptick going to be? How fast is the market going to materialize? And what are medical device manufacturers going to do to satisfy these new security regulations and make sure that the insulin pump that your kid relies on isn't vulnerable to, trivially exploitable cybersecurity vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I mean, exciting times for you guys, and talk about a way to make your impact in the world and protecting people with a very tangible example of a kid and their insulin pump.
Yeah, I mean, we have all hands, once a month, and we like to invite one of the, somebody from one of our customers or a prospective customer to come in and talk about, what is it that your product does? What is it used for? What happens if it goes wrong? If there was a security vulnerability, and there's a bunch of stories of people who rely on insulin pumps losing confidence in the function of the insulin pump for whatever reason, might be cybersecurity related or not, and reverting back to a less safe insulin delivery methodology, which nobody wants, right? So how do we make sure that patients can confidently use these products and not have to worry about, some security vulnerability holding their insulin, ransom or something? That's a situation we don't want to see.
And what a powerful way to connect your employees with the actual people, right? Like I talked to a CHR of a life sciences company, and they would bring some of the patients and family of the patients and talk to them about the impact that, it really connected to the purpose of the organization to actually what the problem they're trying to solve, which in this case is immense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the great things about the med tech field is the vast majority of people that I've interacted with appear to be mission driven, they're purpose driven. I remember when I worked at Varian, we were a company that made a product that was focused on treating cancer. And we would, frequently have employees who had family members or, themselves were impacted by cancer, and talking about how powerful it was to be treated for their own cancer by a product they helped design, right? Or to know that their family members were being treated by the same product was really, really pretty powerful and made the mission very concrete.
Well, Mike, hey, I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate you coming on today. Where can people go to find out more about MedCrypt, maybe even connect with you?
MedCrypt.com, MedCrypt.com is our website. We put together a lot of webinars. Maybe once a month we'll go through a webinar talking about why various different aspects of the medical device cybersecurity problem. I'd love to have people listen in and give their feedback. I'm semi-active on Twitter, or X, even though I refuse to call it that. You can find me on that platform. But MedCrypt.com is where I would go.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for having me.